Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today our group will present about the frictional force that is experiment for physics.
My name is Muhammad Fazarin bin Talha and my metric number is 2023 454 236.
My name is Muhammad Hakim Riza Ul Haq bin Muhammad Faizan. My ID student is 2023-809-248 and I'm from class 1M.
Hi, my name is Muhammad Iznurizal bin Mokhtar. My ID number is 2023-838106.
We are group from AS1201M and our lecturer name is Dr. Wan Aizuddin Wan Razali. Okay, next we go to our experiment objective, that is to determine the coefficient of static friction of different surfaces. Our setup apparatus that we have used in the experiment is the wooden block, rubber, 50 gram masses, 10 Newton spring scale, string, and lastly is the tabletop. In the figure 5.2, you can see the apparatus setup that we have used in this experiment. Then to the next slide is our procedure of the experiment. First, the mass of wooden block was measured and recorded as M. The tabletop were made sure was stable and horizontal to the ground. Procedure 3, the spring scale and the wooden block was attached with a string and was placed them horizontally on the tabletop. Number 4, a 50 gram mass was placed on the wooden block. The procedure 5 is the spring was pulled slowly and after the block started to move, the spring scale's reading was recorded. Number 6, step 3 until 5 was repeated for 3 trials. And number 7 is another 50 gram mass was added on the wooden block and step 4 to 5 was repeated. The step was repeated until total of 500 gram mass is on the wooden block. And our lastly procedure is step 1 until 7 was repeated but used a wooden block with a rubber.
So, this is our result. First, we have mass of wooden block with a rubber. Next, we have mass of wooden block without rubber. For analysis, first, draw and label the free body diagram of the wooden block. 2. Plot graph of static friction force Fs against normal force N for the rubber surface and non-rubber surfaces. 3. Use the gradients obtained from the graph to calculate the coefficient of static friction for each surfaces.
The next one is compare and discuss the coefficient of static friction is obtained. The coefficient of static friction obtained for the mass of a wooden block with a rubber is 1. Meanwhile, for the mass without a rubber is 0.25. A higher coefficient of friction means that more friction force is present relative to the normal force. Static friction is a term used to observe the fact that it usually takes more force to set an object into motion than it takes to keep moving once you have got it started. This means the mass of the wooden block without a rubber needs less force to move the wooden block than the mass with a rubber. So, we move to the question. The first question is, how can anti-lock brake stop a car in a shorter distance than regular brake? It is because ABS also contributes to shorter stopping distance by modulating brake pressure to prevent wheel lock-up. ABS ensures the tire maintains optimal contact with the road surface. This allows the vehicle to decelerate more effectively, reducing the overall distance required to bring it to a stop. So, the second question is, from your experiment, which material has the highest coefficient of static friction? Does this agree with your hypothesis? What do you think to determine the coefficient of static friction? So the answer is wooden block with a rubber have the highest coefficient of static friction. The hypothesis is accepted. Coefficient of static friction can be determined as the ratio between frictional force and normal force. So the last question is, once the mass begins to slide, does it move smoothly or does it undergo stop and go motion? Explain the motion. So let me explain. It moves smoothly when the mass begins to slide. This is because the higher the mass, the higher the movement of the object to move. This is used of the application of Newton's first law which inertia is applied. Discussion. Friction is the force that resists the relative motion of one surface in contact with another. Static friction is the friction that acts on an object that is at rest. Static friction is the force that must be overcome in order to move a static object. The coefficient of static friction is a dimensionless constant that depends on the object and the surface it is laying upon. Friction is influenced by the weight and surface material of the object. The heavier the block is, the larger the friction. It is assumed that the frictional force is proportional to the friction coefficient. This friction coefficient is a static friction coefficient and a kinetic friction coefficient are code for a specific pair of surface. Kinetic friction is the friction that acts on a moving object and the kinetic frictional force. The force needed to start an object moving from a position of rest is larger than the force needed to maintain that motion after it has begun. Therefore, static friction is greater than kinetic friction. In this experiment, we measured the frictional force between a wooden block and the rubber surface on a horizontal and inclined plane. And from the plotted data, we obtained the coefficient of static friction. The last one is conclusion. We can determine the coefficient of static friction of different surface which is rubber surface and without rubber. The coefficient of static friction for the rubber surface is 1. Meanwhile, for the without rubber is 0.25. From this experiment, we learned that friction is a force that resists motion when the surface of one object comes in contact with another surface. We also learned that if the wooden block is placed flat against top table, the frictional force will be equal to the weight of the object. So that's all for the presentation. Thank you.